Right, so we saw the Indian of the Sherish Osman. What we said that the Ikar Sherish Osman was in the two Ifanim, or the two Tnuis, which are called Rotzei Shoy. I will see more about them. Take the verse we go now by Hemshah. Or Inyan, or the Mokimachem of War, and prior to the Abur in Rotzei Shoy, then it's brought down by Mokimachem the Inyan of Kedima ve'ichor shebesfiras. In other words, that in the era in Sefer HaOyez Lamayla Me'asfiras, it's not Shayach Inyan of Kedima ve'ichor. What that means, we saw precedence and subsequent notes. But in the Inyan of the Sfiras, but that's already Madregas, Chalukes, divided one from the other, and it's also the Inyan of Amshach Eser in Seif Bekalim. So therefore we have to say that the Eir is Nimshach only for Ifen Mesuyam in an other, what you might call Gvul Mesuyam, in Chokhmah or in Bina, and then in Midas it's already after there's been like a certain pause in the Gilui of the Ein Seif for the sake of Chokhmah, and then a giving rise to another Inyan. And there's a certain Seder in which those things are Mishkala. And we saw, for example, that Moichin bring Midas, that's the Seder how it is. In Kedusha, particularly in the Sfiras V'Alyonos, that the Inyan of the Midas are only Mishkala al Yedei the Iskalas of the Moichin, which implies that first of all we have the Derek Kedima Agilui of Chokhmah Bina, and then later we have a Skalas of Zohar, with that Inyan of the Midas. So we saw that Inyan is called Kedima V'ichor, and that's an Inyan of Seder V'Hadrogo. It's an Inyan of order, and literally stepped Madrega. One Hadroga means the idea of stepping on steps. Yeah, from one level or equal form of revelation to another. So now the truth of the matter is, says the Rebbe, Gam zehu al yidei b'chinas histalkus v'is pashta. Why do we say that the Ikar Sherish was Rotzei v'Shoy? And now we've gone over to this concept of Kedima ve'ichor. The point being that really in their Nakuda Atzmiyas, they're one and the same Inyan. As we're soon now going to be Masbia, that the Inyan from Rotzoi is the going out, or the Stalkus, the withdrawal of the earth, looking for a higher Madrega altogether. And then the Inyan of Shoyiv is the going back. So here in this Inyan of Kadima ve'ichor, we have a similar Inyan. And he said that's al yidei b'chinas histalkus v'is pashtas. The or shayach Inyan Kadima ve'ichor. So that's the link with the concept of Rotzei v'Shoy. So even though Mamish in this Madrega, it's not really Rotzei v'Shoy in the real sense, because that's in Atzilus, and in Atzilus everything is Kol Mamish in the Eibishter. So it's not really Shaykh to say Rotzei v'Shoy, because we'll soon see later on. Rotzei v'Shoy is only mitzad a distance, mitzad a mercha. But there's a certain aspect of Rotzei v'Shoy, because this Inyan of Kedima ve'ichor, it comes through a stalkus v'is pashtas, a withdrawal, and then a further Gilui. And then once you got a withdrawal, and then a new Gilui, or further Gilui, but Inyan, another Inyan, so then it's shy to talk about a Inyan of Zman, or Al-Chaponim Ha'inyan from Seder Zman. So that's what we're about to be to explain now. Gam zehu Inyan b'chinas histalkus v'is pashtas, ta'or shayach Inyan Kedima ve'ichor. There, for example, שהכסר נמשך ונפסח המשוכות ונמשך בחינת חוכמה. So we see that the way the spheres give rise one to the other, that first of all we had the Gilui which was called Keser, and in order for Chokhmah to appear Kaviochel, for there to be the Gilui of Chokhmah in Olam HaAtzilus, then there had to be, as it were, a ceasing of the Gilui of Keser, Madrega Mesuyem. Because Koloid that Keser would be Mamish Galui, there'd be Pastas Shlemo, with a full expression of everything it has to say, then it would be Mavatel any other possibility of Gilui, because everything would be just Niklau in the what you might call the elevation of Keser. Therefore, the Indian of Gilui HaKeser was Nifsak. It was literally withheld or interrupted. Nimshach v'nifsach hamshochosei v'nimshach b'chinas hachokhmah. And once we made that interruption or that withdrawal of the Gilui of Keser, then we gave rise to the Indian of Chokhmah. And so we can understand that it's similar. If we want to give rise to the Indian of Bina, then we have to allow Chokhmah to be Nimshach, but at a certain point we're going to have to cause a certain withdrawal in the Gilui HaChokhmah, and that will cause a possibility for the appearance of Bina. Once again, a Ispashtas, B'derech HaMshocha, and then an interruption of that, and a withdrawal, and a bringing of a new in. Bim Koimai. Aval kasher HaMshocha hi shaloi boifim b'chinas Yistalchus v'Ispashtas, Eino Shai b'chinas Kedima v'Ichor. But if we were to imagine that there was a Gilui, let's say, of Keser, and not even that it was Mistaleik, B'Rotzen Hashem, of course, and then there was Mispashet, a new Inyan, which was Chokhmah, but it would only be, let's say, the Gilui of Keser, so even Am Shocha v'Yizgalus u'shukulam boim b'shover. If we wanted that there should be a Gilui together with Keser of all the other spheres, then they would have to all come together with Keser. In other words, they'd all have to be in a way which would be kolul in Keser. In other words, they're all kolulim in Chitzenius HaKeser anyway. And if they were to be Mishgala, but even because there was only one Hamshocha, then all of them would be Nikah, each one in its Ishkalas B'toich HaKeser, but it would be all like equal. Ukamesh Koser B'mochimacha. And so then you wouldn't have any Zman. It wouldn't be Shay at the beginning of Zman. It wouldn't be Shay Kedima V'Yichel, because they'd all be there at the same time. But how can you have everything there at the same time if they're all different in Yonim? Then how can you have them all at the same time? So we'd have to say that then they would be in a much higher Madrega, because they would be Klulim in such a way that in the Atzmus of the Ein Sof, in such a way that there wouldn't be any clash between them. And there wouldn't be any problem with the fact that all of them were there together. B'Bisman, that you have opposites, Chesed and Gvura are opposite, even Chokhmah Bina to a certain extent are opposite. They're all completely Mina Kotzer, Ela Kotzer, different is in Yonim and different is Kalim. So if they were all to come in a Amshocha Achas, what all of them would be there equally, then they would be in a higher way, and they would come in an even what it wouldn't be shy to hold in infant's man, because there's no ceasing of one in order to give rise to the Adiyadya. And that's what the Alter brings down in Torah, that in the Madregas Shalamayla Me'atzilus, particularly in Akudim, in Olam Akudim, or in Olam in the Inifa Ak, but over there all the spheres attack a Beshover, they're all equal, and they're all Begilui Biyachad, or they're all Klulim or Betelim inside the Ein Sof in such a way that there's no clash between the fact that they're all there together. Well, then it's a much higher Madrega, and it's not Shaykh into a division of levels. They're all just there mitzad the omnipotence of the Eibishter, mitzad the Gilui Ein Sof, he can have them all there, and yet they're all betelim to him. And a dogma to that we find in the Nefesh HaAdam. Prior to these galus of all the koiches in the Evrei HaAdam, or even for that matter, how they have miskala in the Moya at the beginning, they're all krulim b'teik etzem hanefesh. And it's written that all the Eser koiches, Chochma, Bina, and the Sheva Midas are all krulim b'teik hanefesh. Even that they're all present together, and yet they're all betelim to the greatness of the Etzem. And that's because what is really ruling there is the greatness of the Etzem. And remember, all of them are on a level of bittul to that, what you might call greatness of the pshitas of the Etzem HaNefesh. But that's on a much higher madrega and a much more klolius state of a general state of the Nefesh. So the Rebbe said it could be like that Lamaila also, and it is. As we said in Elam HaKudim, or in Ak, in the madrega Lamaila mi'atzil. But in the Inyan of Atzilas, where we have Mamish Hamshochas, Oiris, Bekelim, and we have that one sphere is completely different than the other, and each one takes up its place biyachad with the other, mitzad the limitation of each Inyan and its Keli. So therefore, that's where we begin with this idea of Kadima ve'icho and this Inyan of Ispashtas v'Istalkes, and that leads to a possibility of the Inyan of Zman. And that's what he says now. Omno, he says, Sheirish v'sibas hazman v'chol ha'madreges hu b'chinas ha'rotzei v'shoiv shaboy. In other words, in Atzilas, it's this idea of Kadima ve'icho. And that's what the Medrash calls Seder Zman. But basically, that's also a form of Rotzei v'shoiv. Not Mamish Emes Rotzei v'shoiv, but it's a form, because it's like we saw, one is Nimshach, and then it goes away, and it allows another one to come in, and that goes away, and another one comes. So we see this like a form of Hamshocha, then Istalchus, Hamshocha and Istalchus, but that's already a beginning of the concept of Rotzei v'shoiv. Of why it's not Mamish Emes Rotzei v'shoiv, we'll soon see as we go along, that there's delicate differences between this idea of Kadima ve'icho, which is based on a similar principle, but it's not Mamish Rotzei v'shoiv. But he said the Emes Shoyrech, what you might call the root of everything, and the reason for Zman is in the concept of Rotzei v'shoiv. Now that pasuk, that lashon Rotzei v'shoiv, that's a pasuk in the famous Nevuah of Yechezkel HaNavi, where he saw the Merkava, the chariot, the holy chariot, Lamaila. It's the first chapter in Yechezkel HaNavi. That's the famous thing which is read in the Beis Knesset on Shavuos, where he saw all the different inyanim in what we call the Merkava Ho'elyoina. And so he saw over there these angels that they call Chayos. He saw Oifanim and he saw Chayos. And he also saw, for that matter, Srofim. In other words, he saw three different types of angels. And then he saw how they interrelate, and on different levels. And then he saw that above their heads there was like a firmament, as he calls it, a type of heaven over their heads. And then Lamaila Mizeh, he saw further kisei, and then he saw sitting on the kisei, he saw Mara Odom of Nomaila. But as we point out, that's got a shaykhut to the Inyan of Atzilas. So he saw the whole Inyan of what we call Maisa Merkava, as the Gemara calls it in the Mishnah in Masechta Chagiga. So it's written over there that he saw these angels, which are called Chayos. He saw them, and they were V'Chayos Rotzei v'Shoiv Kamare HaBazak, like the appearance of a thing called bazak. So we need to understand what does it mean, this word bazak. But anyway, that's what he saw. He saw the highest Rotzei v'shoiv in the form of this, or with the appearance of a thing called the bazak. So it comes on Rashi, And there are two ways we can understand that hemshech of the pasuk Kemare HaBazak. Either we say that the Mare HaBazak is a description of what the Chayas HaKodesh look like. It's a description of what you might call their Mare, what they look like. Chayas Rotzei V'Shoiv Kemare HaBazak, that's the way they look when they're doing these things. Or I can say that Kemare HaBazak is a description of why and how they are Rotzei V'Shoiv, and that the Indian from Mare HaBazak is like a dogma and an example of their Rotzei V'Shoiv. And it's a way of understanding. In other words, either it's a descriptive term of what the Chayas look like at all times for that matter, but particularly when they're in this state of Rotzei V'Shoiv, or I say that the Indian from Mare HaBazak is a description of the Klolos HaPu'ula of Rotzei V'Shoiv. And so Rashi begins with a verb Pshat and Rashi over there. Rashi begins with a biur which makes it look that he learns that Kemare HaBazak is a biur in the Pu'ula, or the activity of Rotzei V'Shoiv. And he says that what happens is that these Chayos are underneath the firmament. They're inside a world where they're underneath this rakia that's over their heads. Beyond the rakia, Lamayla Mizeh, is what he calls the Shekhinah. It's the Gilui of the Eibishter in an intense form called the Shekhinah. Underneath the firmament, it's already a ha'ora b'vad, or a limitation from the Shekhinah. So these Chayas, every now and then, they go up with tremendous eagerness and tremendous desire to get their heads out through this firmament and try and see, as it were, the Shekhinah, this Gilui, the Shekhinah l'mayla mid the firmament. So they lift themselves up and they push their heads through the rakia, through the firmament. And as soon as they see this Gevaldik Gilui, the Shekhinah, and they pop back down again, and they come back, and they feel, or they realize that their place is really where they were before. So and so Rashi says, "Me'emas hashchina," the tremendous, what you might call pachad that the Shekhinah throws on them when they see him. So then they pop back down again. So Rashi says that's the Indian of Mara. So he says Mare HaBazak is like certain furnaces in the old days where they used to make bricks or nochazoch. They used to have tremendous heat, and then there was like a hole, and the flames used to sort of burst out from them. The flames would burst out through this hole, and then they would suck back in again. So it would appear that at the beginning Rashi learns that Kemare HaBazak is a biur in the whole Indian of the Pu'ula of Rotzei V'Shoiv, just like this Bazak, the flames inside this thing called Bazak go up through this hole, and then all of a sudden they get sort of drawn with tremendous speed back down. Well, that's like a biur in what's happening to these angels. They pop their heads up, and all of a sudden they get drawn and they pop down again into the oilam where they were before. And then there's other biur that Rashi brings. He brings these marich in the Indian of Mare HaBazak. It means their color, it means what they look like, etc. etc. And the Targum Yonis and Ben Uziel over there. He's also marich in this Indian, but what it appears from him is a similar type of thing to what Rashi says, that they have this tremendous desire to see the Shekhinah, to be batil, to be nikla, as it were, in the Shekhinah, and so they go upwards. But when they actually become aware of the greatness of the Gilui that they're longing for, they, as it were, retreat back. So Rashi and the Targum, and most of the other great Meforshim, learned similarly that that's the ikka difference in the great biurim is as to what is this Indian of Mare HaBazak. Is it a description of their colors, or is it a description of their pu'ula, the Rotzei V'Shoiv, v'chuli. But the reason we mentioned that was because it helps us to understand the whole concept of the sudden arise of these flames and then their sudden retreat. However, the simple taich of that pasuk is that the word chayos is talking about angels. And according to Roiv Abiurim and Siddur, it's talking about angels in Olam HaYetzirah. Angels on a certain level in a certain Olam. Comes along here, the Rebbe, and he teaches that the word Chayois here is not referring to the angels mentioned in the Nebuah of Yecheskel over there, but we're talking in a more general way, and we're like playing on words. We're borrowing that word Chayois and we're altering its meaning somewhat, because it so happens that Bedugma to those Malachim, they act in a way which is a form of living example of the way all the life force in the Oilamas. In other words, the word Chayois can be touched as Chayutz, and it can be touched as referring to all the life force which is nimshach into the Oilam from the Eibishter to give forth and to I'm finding those things a bit hard to take time. So anyway, people will sweat if you turn them off. I have a bit of a cold in those things, so it kept me in my throat. And so therefore, we're making here like a play on words, but it's a very important inyan, because we're moving from the simple touch of the posik into a Havana, a general understanding, but again to all the divine influence which is nimshach into Eilamas. And that's what he says now. Kamesh Kosu Beyachayois Rotsoi Voshoi. Now, just a word about those two verbs. Now, those two verbs are like participial uses of verbs, and they mean are running and are returning, like it's an ongoing thing. And the Radak over there in Danach, he learns that the word rotsoi is based on two basic words in Lashon Kodesh. One is ratzon, which means will, and the other is rotz, which means to run. And he makes a connection. He said that basically your will, which is your ratzon, is anyway connected with the word rotz, because when you have a ratzon, then you are, how do you call it, mizdarez, and you run and you move swiftly and with toikif towards a certain inyan. And he says that this aleph, which occurs at the end of the word rotzoi, is an unusual participial form of the verb, which makes it like a continuous thing, as I said. It's always going on. And therefore, these angels are always running. They're moving with tremendous speed upwards, because they have a deep inner pneumistic will. They have an inner rotzoin. And the aleph, which cuts the word short, is like a participial usage. They are always running, and therefore voshoiv, shoiv is also a form of a noun from the verb. It's like a form of participle. They're always running outwards, mitzad the great desire, and they're always coming back. And immediately he teaches it in a different way. Da'achayis eloki hanimshach mibchinas dvar havaye lahachis kol hanivroim hu b'chinas rotzoi shoiv b'chinas histalchus v'hispashtas. Now, unless you're familiar with the posik, unless you're familiar with what's going on, you can just pass that over and you wouldn't really know what you're talking about. You would just read that sentence and it wouldn't have any pshat. Ein was a pure. It's only after you know what's stated in the posik. It was tutz charum in the posik, and in the chayas that are talked about over there in the posik, all of a sudden the Rebbe immediately moves and he said, the chayas eloki anim shel b'chinas dvar havaya. So he's teaching that Chayus means life force. Yeah, the divine life force in all the world. So he's made a tremendously significant change in the view of the posik. That's not just referring to these angels. So that means that they're like a living example of what is Ainian Kloli B'chol HaIshtalshalos. And therefore they're in a state of Rotzei V'shoiv B'chinas Histalkus V'hispash. Rotzei istalkus, rotzei meaning withdrawal or going upwards, histalkus, and his pashtus, yeah, coming down again, spreading out and expanding backwards, downward. Ukamashal, for example, Neshimas Ruach HaChayim Sheba'adam. If we take the breathing in of the spirit of life, Ruach Chayim, meaning the things which give from the air life to the Adam, Shebachol Rega Nimshach HaChayas min Maker Nafshei, Umiyad Kerega Choizer HaChayas Lotzeis Ulistalik min Aguf, Lisaleis Uliskalel Bimkoiroi. Shenimshach mimeno v'choizer v'nimshach chayus achel. Now this is very important, that we have to be careful here, what's the dogma? Because sometimes in certain drushim in Chassidus, another dogma is brought, and you have to be careful not to slip from one dogma into the other. And in order to understand what the dictuk here is, well, maybe we'll just give a brief description of the other view which is brought. And as we see when I mentioned breathe, yeah, they had some day-to-day kiyum, the day-to-day preservation of life on the part of the mensch is that he breathes. Yeah, he breathes in the air and he breathes it out. So we see that he breathes in the form of a going up, yeah, like a drawing upwards and inwards into himself, and then there's a step downwards in the form of his pashtas. So in many drushim of Chassidus, it's brought that that's why the Adam in his actual day-to-day life is in a dogma of Rotzei v'Shoiv, because he's all the time drawing in and he's all drawing upwards and he's giving downwards. And that's like a passage of the chayes into him and then a passage of it out, and then immediately there's another. And so what he draws in the next time is not the same what he drew in the time before. And therefore we have to hope that the air is pure and everything that he doesn't draw in something completely different this time than what he drew the time before. But we see once again there's a very powerful control of the moichin over here. But nobody seems to have the little. But anyway, whatever. You have to be very careful. And so what happens over there is that he draws in a new entity. Yeah, what he takes in is a new Indian. It's not the same what he just allowed to passage downwards in a form of going out from him. But that way we can suggest that that's not, even though that's an emes dogma, it's a dogma of Rotzei v'Shoiv, but it's a further, what you might call, result of something more elevated inside the Adam Atzmei. Well, that's what you said the Rebbe is describing here. And when he says Neshimas Ruach HaChayim Sheba Adam, he doesn't really mean the idea of breathing, even though the word Neshima means breathing. It's from the word Neshama. But the Rebbe is saying that if he is referring to the Neshima, then he's coming to it from a slightly different angle. And that is that he says, Shebachol Rega Nimshach HaChayas min Maker Nafshei, that every second there's a new derivation of life force from the very Moker of the Nefesh. In other words, we're talking about that the Nefesh in its pshitas is too high to be nimshach into the guf, so it gives off what we call a ha'ora, how do you call it, a luminescence, and that luminescence, or that ha'ora, is nimshach into the body and gives lives and life force, because that's what the nefesh is about. The nefesh is a koyach lahachiyah, to give life, and it is nimshach into all the area guf. Umiyad kerega, immediately, kerega, meaning with the whole measurement only of a moment, it's choizer achayis, lotzeis, uli istaleit min aguf, that chayis it goes out and it withdraws altogether, listalik, from the body. Where does it go? It goes back and it's nimshach into the pshitas of the etzem hanefesh, which is completely beyond, as the Alter Rebbe said in Perek Nun Aleph in Tanya, that the etzem hanefesh is completely beyond any hamshacha into the body. So it goes up into the simplicity of the etzem hanefesh. Shenimshach mimeno. I'm sorry. Yeah, it goes into the mokia from whence it came. And there's now a new chayas, which is nimshach. In other words, it's not the same chayas which was there a minute before. It's a new chayas from the nefesh. Why? Because the nefesh, being as it is completely moved out, completely havdola gemura from anything to do with chayas. Everything which is nimshach is always a new thing, because it's completely moved out from any idea of chayas. When that chayas returns, then a new inyan which has never been there before is mishgala. Now that's going to become important for us later on when we see certain nimsholim in the inyan of the Olamas, that it's another chayus. It's not the same chayus. The Rebbe is not talking here about pashtus, this is about the breath. So we have to say that because the etzem hanefesh relates to the body in this way, by way of ha'ora, and that ha'ora is always being choizev and nishtalik, and a new ha'ora is being nimshach, but that's what causes it, in ultimately speaking, in a physical way. He also carries out a certain pu'ula, which is like, historical for his pashtus. But that's not the thing that we're describing here. We're describing a deeper inyan, which has got to do with the mokir of the whole hamshocha of the chayis into the gufa adam to give him life. So now says the Rebbe Yochamoy Kain in the nimshal. That's the moshel. Now we go to the nimshal. Hu b'chinas hachayus ha'eloki. Once again, we're continuing with our play on words. Chayus is referring to the chayus eloki. Shenimshach lahachiyes ha'olamaz. The acha shenimshach miyad hu b'chinas histalkus lihiskolel bim koiroi. He said immediately after it's been nimshach, then immediately it's in a state of withdrawal to go back and to be nikhlal in its makor. Lihiskalel meaning to mamish become absorbed into the cloud that it becomes once again only its moker. Previous it was ahara, now it goes back and it's completely lost in the moker. How does the word continue to live? So he says that's the inyan of rotzoi. And now there's nimshach, a new chayas. But we're going to make a diuk in that later on, that it's another chayas every second. So, in Cain, the inyan of Olamas here is referring to the created Olamas in Pashtus, Bria Yetzirah Vasiyah, that all the chayas which is nimshach into them is going and coming the whole time. It's entering and withdrawing every second. Now, when we say every second, we're going to see in a minute why we use that expression, because it's this action which allows us to talk about seconds. Otherwise, we have time. But this whole movement gives rise to the concept of time, and it's like the idea of the ticking of the clock, with the whole famous inyan in time. So he says that it's Elis Kolel Bim Koiroi, and there's Nimshach Shezeh B'chidas HaRotzoi, and then there's Nimshach Chayas Acher, a new Chayas, that's the inyan of Shoy. So now that's an element is Bria Yetzirah Asiyah. And we're going to see that it's tafki in them that a shayat this inyan of Rotzoi v'Shoy in the emes of them. V'cheinu b'amshochas ha'er b'atzilas gamkein b'bchinas Rotzoi v'Shoy. He said even in Atzilas we can also talk about this inyan of Rotzoi v'Shoy. Ki ha'oyer hu b'chinas Rotzoi la'aleis u'lihikolel bimkoiroi u'kamishkosu b'mokimacha hatam al zeh. V'alidei zeh nasa b'chinas ischalkes azman. And through the fact that the is in a state of Rotzoi, and then later it comes back in the form of Shoiv, or he said that very inyan, there's like a hefsek between the Rotzoi and the Shoiv. It's through that we get to the inyan of the interdivision of time. The meyacha sheyesh b'chinas istalkis vis pashtes, since we have to talk about this idea of withdrawal and then return by way of his pastors, that causes that the oyer of chayes, we're talking about the etzem oyer of chayes, that comes in a state of interdivision. It withdraws and then it comes back again in a form of hamshocha. That means that the first oyer has been interrupted. If it would only be in a form of hamshocha, and it wouldn't have this inyan of interruption by being mistalik, and then afterwards is pastors, there wouldn't be any inyan of interruption. Everything would be in a state of a bligvo. In other words, at each hamshocha would just go ad ein sof. There would be no interruption. It would just go bli kol ma'achshe l'rucha. It would just be nimshach ad infinitum, ad ein sof. Because the koyach of the gilui of the Eibishter is ein sof. The koyach of the Oyer HaNitzchok b'meno is ein sof. And that's similar to what we said before. You could maybe have madregas b'toich there. Of all the madregas would be b'shova. They'd all be equal and botel v'niklal inside the Oyer. But he said, what causes this whole idea of his chalkes, that they're like interdivided levels, is the fact that there's a gilui of the Oyer, and then there's a withdrawal of the Oyer to allow another inyan to come in. Yeah, which means that the other inyan is now a new Isgalus, but it's another Isgalus. Remember the fact that this Oyer returned, and now there's another Isgalus, well, that causes what we call Ischalkis, interdivision of levels. Once you've got interdivision of levels, you've got two things which are not mamish. They're the same inyan, they're mucholokim, zemizeh, then they could be like measurements, or they could be like entities which indicate a certain seder, or a certain following zemi zeh. And so in Atzilus, that's the beginning of time. Albeit over there it's not mamish time, because as we said, it's only kedim over ichur, it's like presence and subsequence. But when you get into biyah, then it becomes mamish a inyan of time. So what we see then, that the inyan of time begins with the concept of ischalkus, interdivision of one level to another. That is a beginning of a possibility that there should be time. Because what is time? As we said on numerous occasions, time is that everything is divided into minutes or seconds. I'm now here, and another second I've already gone ahead, and another second and then I can actually measure that, and I can say it's now 5 minutes later. It's not that same state that was there, but it's not the same state that was there before. And if it's not the same state, then it's not the same inyan b'klal, and therefore the chayes inside what's giving rise to that fact that this is now moved so much on the clock is another chayes. In other words, that you're not the same Adam from 1 minute to the other. And the fact that you're not the same Adam from one point to the other, well, that's what makes it possible that the beast man. So what it boils down to is, in simple language, is that we're all altering every second. We're all altering because we all have a new gilui of chayas from the nefesh, and we have a new gilui that's true in the fact that there's a new gilui elikus to the nefesh, and to the group. Every second we're a new entity. We're moving like, from, when I say new entity, new highest inside our entity. It so happens that our group is also a new entity every second, because the Eibster also is Mechadish B'chol Yom Tomid, even the Gashmias. But that's what another inyan. Spiritually speaking, you're not the same as you are from one second to the other. And the fact that you move like that and you're interdivided, well, then you can begin counting time. Well, that gives rise to the concept. But if you're unchangeable and there's never any change in you, there's never any change in anything, and everything's just the same as it was, then you haven't got time. And that's the concept of L'mayla Miyah Asman. In other words, the things that are not given to any interdivision of one level to another and don't change, don't have time. Ain't Shema. And therefore there's very famous, how do you call it, Rabbeinu B'chaya, very famous, brought down and he writes in Vayikra, the Rabbeinu B'chaya, and he says that from the moment that you are born, you already begin disintegrating. And I think this is medically supportable. I'm not a doctor, but I notice that one of the medical fraternity here is nodding in quite an accepting way. In other words, that there's a form of what you might call deterioration in matter from the moment it comes about.
We assume the opposite. The chayes is constantly being rejuvenated every moment.
Yeah.
And why would things age? You would think it would be the opposite.
No. What it means is that you're not the same as you were before, which means that you're always altering. You're changing from one point to another. Yeah, so what the Rabbeinu B'chaya points out is that change doesn't happen to be to your advantage. And that's another Gizreira what Hashem made. That's another thing that He made. You've got a good point. He could have made it that we change, but we just change everlastingly in a way that will remain much the same as what we are. But He didn't make it that way. In other words, that's also part of the divine plan for whatever reason. Known to Hashem, that's the way He wanted it. But my point with the Rabbeinu B'chaya is that that's only possible if you're different every moment. If you're not different, that it's not really shy to talk about improvement or deterioration. It's just what you are, and it's just like that. So, we could imagine Hashem just saying after a while, "Stop, boom, schneid." That's it. Okay, you've had your play. Boom. Hashem will just bring a sort of thing for these pool games. Just go pop you off the table. All right, that could also be. But what the Rabbeinu B'chaya is saying is that it's not that way. You're changing every minute, and Hashem made the great trial of our lives that we're not changing. We're not changing. We are changing for the better in certain ways, but in certain ways we're like winding down, as it were, from the very moment you begin. As it were, winding down. Once you get past about 55 or so, you begin to feel it. You begin to feel that's something. So simple. Huh? Oh, ja, that's an andere maat. When it's on Tchias HaMeisim, you want an andere maat. Tchias HaMeisim, the Eibus is going to give that the whole Hamshach will be from L'mayla Mirotze V'Shoyiv. And then the Rotze V'Shoyiv will be only, in our knowledge of Hashem. But when I get to our guf will just live eternally. But then He will give us our chayas, which is Mitzad Seiv Kolam. In Seiv Kolam is also Rotze V'Shoyiv. He will give a chayas into the guf, which is in Seiv Kolam himself, Seiv Shebaseiv. And that's the Indian that will literally, that Yosid will live from us for Saint Seiv, Lamaisa. But that's the Indian of V'nichyer Lefonov, has written V'yikimenu Miyomayim V'yom HaShlishi. Nichyer, Nokum V'nichyer Lefonov. Yom HaShlishi is referring to the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi. Yom HaShlishi, Nichyer Lefonov. Mamish in front of Him in Atzmus Mouth. But the way it is now, that's the Indian. Well, remember, a very fascinating thing here is, that what we find is that the fact that we're altering and that things alter, that's what makes time. That's what makes time possible.
Rabbi, if I'm you all the time, why should I do tshuva? Why should I do tshuva if I'm you all the time? Meaning the old self, the old spirit.
Well, you see, it's like we said, at a certain point, you know, you gotta, how's it written, it's this week's Pirkei Avos, you know, Kavya ben Mahalalel. He was really quite a, I don't use the expression about the Taloim, he was quite a cookie, but, you know, nonetheless, there is such an expression. Kavya ben Mahalalel. He says, you know, that the Dam Yaim Boso, Le'an Tohilu, Lifnei, oh, the main thing is, he says, Lifnei Miyata Osid Litein Dinva, V'cheshpein. Emes, you come from a smelly drop. That's what he said. And he said, and therefore, it's got deterioration in it. Therefore, even the form that it began, it's Rabbeinu B'chaye. Yeah, so therefore you're not going to be here for good. Dafki, because of that, you better work out what's going on, because you're going to have to give a dinva, a cheshbon. It depends which way you look at it. So, therefore, you have to do tshuva in order to keep up with Makavia ben Mahalalel. And therefore it's written that the Adius, the Mishnah brings down about Makavia ben Mahalalel, that Loi Hoyo, it's written that Loi Hoyo, Dal says Ha'azora, Nizgores al Yerei Chet, Kamoya Kavia ben Mahalalel. He was very amazing. He said the gates of the Beis Hamikdash never closed on a fear of sin like a Kavya ben Mahalalel. So why is it after you said the gates of the Beis Hamikdash? So it appears that maybe he was still in the time of the Mikdash. Anyway, he was a very great man. So he tells you that Dafki, because you're gradually winding down, as you get, it's better that you sort of cut back. That you should be able to give a proper din v'cheshbon.
You have to say, Adam Rishon of Gan Eden wasn't bound to this.
Yeah?
Adam Rishon of Gan Eden wasn't bound to this idea of aging of stuff.
To a certain extent, yeah, well, you see, Adam Rishon, he was like an interesting combination. That he was in Zman, but it was the Zman from Seviv Kolam. It was Rotzev V'Shoiv Mitzat Seviv Kolam. But that means that you've got there like a contrast, which is mitzad the omnipotence of Hashem, that you can have these madrigas interchanging the whole time, but they'll just interchange forever. And our interchanging is because we're changing, and that's why I brought the Rabbeinu B'chaye. We're not changing, without end. We're changing in a way that we're heading towards a certain sort of. But anyway, whatever. And so this is what takes me back to those guys with these little things, heading for the Big Bang, any moment. So those who say that the world began with a Big Bang, basically, but if the world's going to finish with a Big Bang, that would appear. It's going to be a big bang, and Mashiach is going to walk in. So we've got to have it any second now. I'm mistaken from here.
Amen.
Poor old Gershon's got a vested interest already. He's got his Nogea Bador. Mashiach should come and he say, he should to go back to trust. Anyway, it's interesting to know what the role of trust is in this whole union, but this is not the place in Ashur and Tamavav to become involved in it. But there's quite a lot to be said about it. So maybe at some other point we'll have a few words about the union for Tzfas. So I've got a few theories why it is that Tzfas is Davke coughing so much difficulty at the moment. Anyway, it's a very fascinating thing that I heard. I spoke with a guy just a couple of hours ago. He's a sefer and he deals in Sifrei Torah and everything. So I said, listen here, man, you were supposed to bring me a certain thing today. What are you up to? And he said, oh, I can't bring it today because I just came to work. It's about 5 in the afternoon. I said, what are you doing coming to work at 5 in the afternoon? So he said, well, I was in Lebanon. I said, what? He said he was in Lebanon. And he said that there's some guy some gvir, it might be the same gvir that's giving the money for all these people down here in Ashkelon. You know, there's some huge tent in Ashkelon, but there's food laid on. You can just come and eat as much as you like any time. And there's some gvir guy, he's a Russian, that he's paying for it. Anyway, some gvir gave money for a Sefer Torah for the Chayalim. You know, not the Chabad Sefer Torah, but mamish, a finished Sefer Torah. He bought it, paid cash money for it, and he said he wants it to be taken in. He's not a religious man himself. That he wants it to be taken into Lebanon, and they should bring this Sefer Torah over the border, and it should be held there, and that should be for the sake of the Chayalim. Yeah, very amazing idea. And this guy, somehow or another, he was the one that he's earning a few bucks on the deal. He's the one that got the Sefer Torah. So they made a whole Achnos Sefer Torah up on the border, beginning from this morning until a certain point, and then in the end the army said, listen here guys, you got to get out of here, we can't have all this going on. And I left, and he came back down, and that's why he got to work very, very late. He just arrived to work about 5:30 in the afternoon, because he'd been putting in a Sefer Torah in Lebanon, over the border. Amazing thing. So all sorts of amazing things are happening with all the terrible tar. And you should realize that they say that according to the number of these things that have fallen, that the number of actual damage that's been done and the actual loss of life, it's just, you know, just doesn't make any sense, you know, klal. And they say that these people that never were killed were people that did not listen carefully to the instructions they were given, and they did things which were just openly not correct in the light of the situation. And that's never why they were here. They were not why they were here, but you know, they were not being careful. That's what I heard today from somebody who knows what's going on. So Lepoil, Yidden who've lived in a modest way and have tried to listen to what they're being told to do under certain circumstances, have not been affected. There's been all these hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands, of tilim have fallen on huge parts of the country, and Baruch Hashem, nobody's really been hurt. It's unbelievable.
My friend,
Huh?
Huh? He works in antennas. I have a friend that works in the army. He works in antennas in the army. He works flies antennas. He says once he climbed there, and this Katyusha fell between two antennas. This big blow up. He got stuck there.
It's unbelievable. I mean, there are these unbelievable nisim. Look, Hashem should give that we have to. Hashem should give us nisim in a way that Mashiach will make nisim. You know, Chatchila, Ariva, you know, Gila Lakus in the world. But there is tremendous nisim happening, and I think that these things that they're doing, what the Rebbe would certainly tell us that that's what we must do. Is, you know, tefillin and miftoim, and these guys brought in a Sefer Torah over there, and all these sort of things. With belief safek, it's having a very big effect on the situation. And even I heard in the name of one of the people who knows a lot what goes on, he's one of these people that knows a lot that goes on. He told me that even though there have been losses amongst the soldiers, or the number of soldiers that have actually been hit and wounded or killed, is also nothing like what they thought it would be. Close. Hashem should help to help further. It should be, because it's a terrible war at the moment and it's still going on. So we need that all these young men, they should all be protected and looked after. And that was very important that we act between ourselves in a good way and an understanding way. Everything helps. And if we're good to one another, and we do mitzvahs as much as we can, and we put tefillin on people and do the Rebbe's miftoim, these things have the most amazing effect. We just, ourselves, we don't know. The Rebbe spoke then in the time of the 6-Day War. The Rebbe said we have no idea. One person puts on tefillin, way back behind the line, what effect it has in what's going on over there. The Rebbe said it on several occasions. You know, if you just Mazaki Yidden with mitzvahs, it's like we learned, what did we learn over here? The mitzvahs are l'beli, the inif and the er ha'beli, afil begila lamata. They ain't safe, mamish begila lamata. So it doesn't really matter where you are. I mean, you can be in a place X kilometers or who knows where from the place that really needs protection, and by doing a mitzvah over here, you're protecting you're protecting the people over there. So Be'ez Hashem should give that protection, but He should bring the great protection, which be this Galus of Melech HaMashiach.
Amen.
Take you from Miyad. All right, so look, we've almost reached our time. I'm not feeling so well, so I'm just going to say another few words and then we'll complete for this evening. So he said that this is a very profound Indian, so it's not, I mean, I can just learn this through and just type it out for you, but it's not proper. There's so many things which are hidden here that we've got to deal with it very carefully, step by step. So that was it, the Rebbe, he said, I'm sorry, and he says, why? He said, because Lalis ulikol bimkoiroi kamishkosu b'machimacha hatam al zeh. V'alidei zeh naso b'chinas ischalchis hazman. The me'achas sheyesh b'chinas istalchis v'ispashtes hari bo ho'er v'achayis b'chinas ischalchis shemistalek v'chozer v'nimshach. V'aynu shenifsak ho'er. It's been interrupted. She'im hoye b'chinas amshocha, lo b'chinas istalchus v'spashtes, hare lo hoye nifsak. V'hoye oz b'chinas bligvo. Avo kasher hu b'chinas istalchus v'spashtes, hare hu nifsak hamshochosei, there's an interruption, hare zeh mekoyer l'schalchus hazman. That's what the question. That the fact that there's this Indian of one Indian being Nimsha, and then it retreats and gives rise to another Gilui B'derech Yerida of the Eibishter, then that causes, like the Rebbe said, it has to cause like a half sec. There's like what you might call a pause or a interruption between the Istalkus of that oil and the Gilui of the next oil. So it's very hard to talk about, it taking any space of time, but the fact that there is such a thing as a withdrawal of that one, and then there's a replacement of that immediately by another one, of those two inyonim, those two movements lead me to an interruption between two inyonim, no matter how immediate we'll say it is. One is opposite than the other. Well, that means that I've got an interdivision already. That interdivision leads to what we saw before, Kadima Ve'ichur, and then eventually in the created world, so Ve'elam Espriya Yitzir Vasiyah, where you've already got limitation mamish, then that leads to a hefsik, which is like a pause. And that pause becomes like a interdivision, and that interdivision leads from the passage of one point to another point, and that's the whole beginning of time, which means that the whole infinite time is that we're, but we've seen that it's pointed out that that new thing which comes down is a new thing, which means that we're changing the whole time. And the Rebbe is going to stress that a bit further down, that maybe I don't need the changing the whole time to absolutely fix me this idea of hefsek, but the changing makes it more absolute, it makes it more really different than the previous one. Well, since it's something new the whole time, now I get what we call perfection in the idea of interdivision and pause. Yeah, the two of those ideas together, the pause or the division between the Amshach of those two inyanim, and the fact that they're two completely different things, well, that leads me to being in a state like this. Then afterwards, I'm not in the same state. When I say afterwards, now that there's been a movement, I've moved to another state. So that eventually becomes moving the whole time. Well, that moving without end, that's time. So when I say without end, that would be fine. Now that's how it is mitzatzei v'kolam. In Mamali, it's not without end. It's only going to a certain point.
You say that the world ceases to exist in this.
That's what the Gemara said. That's what we quoted yesterday. You remember that the world's only going to last 6,000 years.
In each moment where it's between us and the Shuv, would you say that the world is not existing?
It's very good. It's a very good question. Yeah, that's a very good one. So we have to say that what happens in that split second? What happens to the whole world in that split second? Yeah, that's a very good question. So we find a shaila very similar. We find a very similar shaila when we get to Rosh Hashanah. On the night of Rosh Hashanah, everything goes back. The Erev just takes back the whole thing, and he's right into his atzmas, and then he starts all over again. Is there going to be a world, or is there not? So the famous question in Siddur says, how does the world exist at that particular time? How do we? We should all just go, poof, we're all gone. Dave just called it. Oh, we can bring you back again. We can bring you back again. At extra point on the clock of Rosh Hashanah by day, all of a sudden you all appear back again. Or there was a void where you all just disappear. And we don't. We continue to remain, even though we said that the whole thing has been withdrawn. So that's a famous klal, that once the Eibush has made a certain gilui of Kedusha, he never takes it away entirely. And there's always what's left over, a spark. And that's called in the Zohar Kodesh calls it Kisto de Chiyusa. That in the Chiyus Gufa, it's like a little ember, it's just barely managing to be there. And therefore on Rosh Hashanah by night, the big Chassidim used to mamish Shrei to the Eibush, because they felt that there was something going on, and they felt that the whole world was just like embering away, and it's hanging on this little ember that just keeps burning. We Shrei and therefore, by the Tkiyas on Rosh Hashanah, we bring back the normal Amshocha. And people who are really big Bali Madrega, they feel that. And therefore, the Rebbeim, and you know, on the night of Rosh Hashanah, our Rebbeim would just couldn't talk them. They were just completely in another existence altogether. As one on. And the Rebbe Rashab wouldn't talk the whole first day of Rosh Hashanah until after Mariv on the second night of Rosh Hashanah. He couldn't get a word. He was just one side to in any way communicate with them. And the same with the Frierdiker. I said once or twice when things were really tough, that the Frierdiker Rebbe on the night of Rosh Hashanah, people thought he was gone. They thought it was the end. I wasn't shy. He just couldn't communicate. So they feel that holy. So that's the answer. If in that break, that split, unbelievable break, the Eibush Kilo holds everything together with like an ember, and then it's an amazing idea. I mean, what's really happening is that it's a new world, and you're a new being every split second. I mean, that's it complete. And so big people who are really into Elikus, they feel that. Did I ever tell you the story? I'm a little bit. But anyway, I'll tell you the story. I once I had a mashpia called Rababa Plishkin. Did you guys ever see Rababa? No, none of you. But Rav Walton knew him very well. Because Rav Walton learned in Hadar Torah, and he was mashpia for a certain time in Hadar Torah. But I knew Rabbi very well, because I knew him when he was in Australia, before he went to America. Rabbi told me once a story that there was a chassid in Russia in the old days. He had a terribly hard life. He had terrible tzoros in his private life. And even for him just to be in the house was, not easy at all. No, a person comes home, he has a certain entrance into his family home, but he didn't have that. It was just, everything was just crazy. So he said you'd see this guy, but he would come into the shul in the morning. He said they had this little group. They say Tehillim before davening, and others used to learn a bit of Chassidus. And so he didn't learn the Chassidus. He used to say Tehillim. And then come time for davening, and he would never daven in a minute. He always take time. He was putting on his tefillin, he's doing this, and then he would stand and daven. He said all of a sudden you'd meet up with him about 12 o'clock, by day. And he used to finish davening until he got through the whole davening, and he's a completely different person. Mamish mashvach, mamish like a, what they call it, like a Arya, much like a lion, mamish full of positivity and chayas, and diukim and chassidus and all sorts of inyanim. He looked after his panos, So once Rabbi went up to him, I was listening, what's your secret? He said, So all due respect, you see her sometimes she looks something terrible. Finished. All of a sudden reach out to Dominic. I said, under the men. So he says, no, I'll tell you what my secret is. He said, I'll tell you what the secret is. He said, what is the union of davening? What is the nakuda, the central nakuda of all davening? Is Amachadesh Betuve B'chol Yem Tomid Ma'aser Bareis. He said, we say that, two places in Village Krishma, and that's a big cloud. He said, Amachadesh Betuve B'chol Yem Tomid Ma'aser Bareis. He said, what does that mean? That every moment you're a new being. Let's say what we're learning here. So every moment. B'chol Yem Tomid means every second. Like Smavur in Shara Yivud. And in the Drushim of our Rabbein, so he said, all of a sudden when I start davening, I tune into that Inyan, like I plug into Machadish B'tuvi B'chol Yem Tomid Ma'aser Bareis. So he said, I confess that what I am now in this moment, there's no proof like what's going to be a moment later. It's all the Avish all over again. He's making everything all from the new. He can just change anything at the next second. Everything can just be different than what it is now. She said, the more I daven with that nakuda, I become convinced that it's taka going to be different. Everything is taka different, and it's not the same. It's not the same life, and there's nothing. And you can forget everything that's been in the past. And every moment, you just keep getting more and more closer to newness and to the Eibush. By the time I'm coming out, I'm a you don't know, he said, sometimes I come home at night, I'm tired, and I see the butter, I do what's going on. My stakes go down a little bit. But he said, when I come back to davening the next day, he said, I remember the truth, I really got what's going on. He said, that's why I looked at that's what Rabbi told me in my. Well, that's what we're talking about here. Time is the fact that you're not the same from one second to the other. So you can just do anything with it. Somebody who's really into it, he makes use of that. The next moment he's taka, he's moved. He's moved into a new Indian than what he was the moment before. And if you remind me next time, I'll tell you a story about the Rebbe, Melech HaMashiach, but you have to forgive me, I just can't do that right at this moment. But I might have told you the Ma'aser, but I won't do you any harm to you in a second.